Hello, my name is Ashnod. My pronouns are she, her, or they, them. I've put months of effort into this video essay, and I would appreciate if you stuck around till the end. Even if you don't know League of Legends, I'll do my best to bring you up to speed and explain things that don't explain themselves. Basically, Shyvana, a character in League of Legends, has been passed over for a visual gameplay update for the third time in a row, which, for me, a Shyvana player, sucks. I'm pissed. Grrr. And, we are likely to be stuck with the current form of Shyvana for at least another year. This means that there's still time to make sure that the rework is a good one instead of a stinky poopy bad one like Aatrox is or like Irelia's. Oh, jeez. A visual gameplay update overhauls all of the character's abilities, lore, and art, which is the important part here. For me, at least. This can be a really important moment for a character and can take them from being a horribly unpopular character to play in the video game to being one of the best and most popular champions in the game, which is what happened to Aatrox and Irelia. This is important because this spike in popularity can be used to send good messages to people and to have good character design and good writing. But it also means that the character can, you know, from a gameplay point of view, be made to be more fun to play, right? I see Irelia and Aatrox to have been failures, though, because Aatrox's gameplay update, you know, it kind of deleted the coolest part of his kit from before, which was the fact that he could revive off of consuming your blood. Very, very metal. And with Irelia, it was because she went from being a pretty bad example of women's representation to an equally bad, if not worse, example of women's representation, because Riot Games just decided to keep her big butt skin in the game, and, you know, things like that. They didn't improve on her at all. It was basically a one-to-one on her arts, like, good use as women's representation. This paper, though, is a discussion of women's representation in League of Legends, and is centered around Shyvana and uses her as a sort of case study or a microcosm of the greater game. The purposes of this paper are to examine the art design of Shyvana and her skins, examine other women in the game League of Legends, examine how that design philosophy interacts with the story narrative of the game's universe, to examine how those designs interact with society, because I am the Joker, to examine Shyvana's gameplay design in terms of her kit, to talk about how that kit design interacts with League of Legends as a video game, and the extent to which her kit in the game conveys her power fantasy, to convey my perspective to Riot Games, to hopefully maybe influence the creation of the Shyvana rework and of female characters implemented into the game in the future, so Riot Games stops being an anime girl sexism machine, maybe, to attempt to start discussions about the topics I talk about within this paper, between, like, people who have big voices, maybe, smile, and to attempt to grant people insight into the real-world issues connected to video games and media at large, because video games are art, and so they should therefore get the same amount of criticism that any other form of art should have. As, you know, a prolific games journalist once said, if I am remembering correctly. Basically, Shyvana is my net favorite character now that they ruined Irelia's gameplay, and I'd like to advocate for some changes I'd like to see in her rework so that we can actually get some more good women's representation in the video game beyond, like, the 5 characters that exist that are good women's representation from my point of view. Basically, my main idea is as follows. Objectifying women in League of Legends and media at large is wrong because it contributes to our societal atmosphere of the degradation and reduction of human beings into products, things which are less than human. So, now we're going to move on to key terms. Power fantasies are our first key term. What is a power fantasy, you may be asking? Well, a power fantasy in a video game is an archetype or a concept which a player gets to embody through gameplay. Many things in a video game can be a power fantasy. They're a form of escapist media, and these escapist fantasies usually form around a core set of ideas. Some examples of power fantasies in League of Legends we can find are Ghost Centaur Warrior, Heavily Armored Knight, of quote-unquote justice, more on that later, shape-shifting chameleon, powerful dragon warrior, and shape-shifting succubus anime demon Booba Lady. Now, the thing about power fantasies is that they work in tandem with the actual gameplay of a character and the actual visual representation of the character, which means that if your visual representation of a character is at odds with the gameplay of the character and with the lore of the character, then your character isn't going to make any sense. Basically, Kaisa, who I will cover again later, is an excellent example of the biggest disconnect I can think of right now. Objectification is our next definition, and objectification is defined by the Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy as a notion central to feminist theory. It can be defined as seeing or treating of someone, usually a woman, as an object. That's what objectification is. I say it a lot in this essay. It's an important word to know. Whataboutism is the technique or practice of responding to an accusation or a difficult question by making a counter-accusation or raising a different issue. This is a favorite of incels, basically, when you talk about women's representation, and it sucks, but that's what it means. I talk about this a couple times in this essay as well. The lecherous gaze is just my word for the male gaze, because the male gaze is needlessly divisive and kind of cringe to say, but it's got some, like, authority to it with that name, because it does make sense to an extent. That is defined as the perspective of a notionally typical heterosexual man considered to be embodied in the audience or intended audience for films and other media, characterized by a tendency to objectify or sexualize women. Basically, when stuff is designed intentionally horny and with sexualization of women in mind, that is what the lecherous gaze is. Yeah. The importance of otherness. Shyvana is a member of her society that is othered by virtue of characteristics cast upon her through no fault of her own, and that have no actual bearing on her worth as a person. Her draconic ancestry and origin that is different from the people around her makes her an outcast. She's different, and in her nation, like the United States today, that makes her bad. This mentality, obviously, is wrong, but the Riot Games writers don't actually try to tell us that that mentality is wrong. In fact, they actively downplay the effects this has on a person, because I am certain that the people who wrote Shyvana's story and who write for Riot Games today, based on the way that they write, have never had to think about being othered before. Shyvana, by virtue of being different, is on the cusp of having her rights stripped away and put in a concentration camp. A decidedly bad thing, but we never get insight into how that makes her feel. In Demacia, like many real-world nations contemporarily and historically, being different means that you're bad and you deserve to be mistreated. It gets you put in prison. It gets you, well, mistreated. It gets you killed by people like the character Vane, a sadistic serial killer. The only reason Shyvana isn't subject to the systemic forms of oppression that her brethren face is because she has a protective decree from being hate-crimed given by the king of the country. She only has this protection from hate crimes attached to her, though, because she's saved the king from being killed by a dragon. Otherwise, Shyvana would be thrown in a camp like everyone else, not in the arbitrary group of mages that Demacia decided were the good ones. Actually, it might not have been saved by a dragon. It might have just been saved from normal humans trying to kill him. But either way, it still makes no sense. I take issue with these topics being covered by League of Legends, not because I take issue with the discussion of these topics through media, but because of the utterly comical incompetence of the writers who have designed the lore for League of Legends. When real-life people are still oppressed in this way, and for the characteristics that your allegorical characters are victimized for, you should take effort in your media to condemn this behavior. Though real-life people can't literally do magic, The least you could do is show the damage this causes the characters, rather than painting the elitism, the racism, and the bigotry that is Demacia's system as ever being cool or possibly being good. Riot Games, though, refuses to take that stance. Instead, Riot Games disgustingly depicts the perpetrators of this oppression as heroes in their story on the regular, and it downplays the effects of this oppression on mages in Demacia, on Shyvana, and on, by extension, real-life people who suffer this treatment still to this day. This is shitty, because these people in Demacia are in no way heroes, and should not be presented as such to the viewer. Demacia and its institutions, just like those who perpetrate these atrocities in real life, they are villains. To outright put concentration camps in your story for an outgroup, and then display the people who willingly allowed those camps to exist, and even fight to uphold that system, and allow that system to continue as heroes or being anything other than, pure villains, is gross. If you support concentration camps or the oppression of others, you are a villain. I'm sorry. This disgusting and offensive imagery and theming from Riot Games is just horrific. I just can't understand it. I can't understand, more importantly, why no one talks about this. Real life's people are not set dressing for your story, and their blood and their sweat and their tears are not just things that you can throw into your story to make it more spicy, right? If you're going to make your story into an allegory, don't write like garbage. And Riot Games decidedly has made their story into an allegory by including concentration camps and by including blatant fantasy racism. I feel confident in saying that their story is at least partially allegorical. And when you write in an allegorical context, you, the writer, are explicitly tying a knot between reality and your fiction, a knot that is slightly more real than the normal knot that is tied between reality and your fiction when you're writing. But even if it's not explicitly an allegory, it is your responsibility as a writer to make sure that the umbilical cord that connects your fiction and reality is correctly managed, and you aren't accidentally sending bad messages through your umbilical cord into reality. But Riot Games is doing that because they're irresponsible and they're stupid. Shyvana's story is about otherness, and furthermore, Demacia's story in its entirety includes heavy uses of fantasy racism, a problem we still face today, but a problem that, just like in the story, has caused things like concentration camps, and like compounds, and entire communities that are formed due to segregation, and things like that. And it's to the point where mage seeker compounds, concentration camps, exist in the story, in the setting, wherein Demacia stores mages, people who have done nothing wrong, but be a mage and be alive in Demacia, and use a thing that is part of them, like breathing. Demacia even has a secret police, the Mage Seekers, which seek out mages specifically. And that, to me, echoes the Gestapo and its hunt for opposition during World War II and before. The Gestapo's hunt for opposition included, was not limited to, religious, ethnic, and LGBTQIA+ minorities. And the Mage Seekers, either due to full intent on behalf of the writers or their outright incompetence, just seem to be lazy echoes of the Gestapo, focused on a different type of minority, mages. The Gestapo even wears special regalia to mark them as Mage Seekers, and it marks them apart from the rest of Demacia, which to me echoes the use of Nazi armbands, and things like the SS lightning bolts, right? And the Mage Seekers wear a piece of jewelry called the Petricite Grey Mark, which distinguishes them as a member of the Mage Seekers and gives them authority to perform their duties. They also wear half masks to distinguish themselves from others and show that they are a part of the, secret police. And the mage seekers even go as far as registering mages with the government with paperwork that they don't put in prison or press into their ranks, basically on penalty of being imprisoned, like Silas, for their just having powers. And this is all, to be honest, really disgusting. It's not difficult for me to see the connection between Shyvana's oppression by her society and the oppression that minorities, like myself, face in society to this day. Shyvana's depiction as an inversion of the queer monster trope should end up being a good thing. This time, instead of the queer monster being used as a tool to make fun of queer people, she's supposed to be the hero of the story. But Riot Games' treatment of their lore attempts to justify the oppression she endures, which is, it's just nonsensical. It says to the viewer that your worth as a minority is only determined by your usefulness to the society that beats you down, walks over you, and tries to kill you and stamp you out. And if you aren't useful to the oppressive people who are in charge of you, you, like the mages in Demacia, deserve to be put in a camp or exiled from your country. And you deserve the way that society treats you because you had the option to be more useful to society than you were. To go above and beyond and prove that you are a good one of your protected class. And that is the accidental theme underlying Shyvana and Demacia's story as a whole. Only useful minorities deserve rights is not a good theme for your story to have, and drawing on concentration camp ideas for a quirky little idea for your fantasy setting, not developing the setting at all, and attempting in your lore to even a little bit justify those camps is disgusting. The camps, by the way, are justified to and by the characters in the story because they're scared of the people that they put in the camps doing magic on them. This reminds me of blood libel. I'm not an expert on the subject and I might be wrong, but it's really frustrating for me to not see the Demacians being shown as foolish for this behavior. We still to this day have politicians talking about things like Jewish space lasers starting the fires in California in the United States Congress building. And when your media echoes the Holocaust, you should not make the people being subject to the camps ever seem like even slightly maybe the bad guys, or the treatment against them even possibly justified. Like, hello. Also, no, it doesn't matter if there's actually magic in the world of the game. Concentration camps are still wrong. Like, it's just wrong. I don't know how to tell that, explain that. And it's still wrong no matter what dubious justification you come up with, because any justification is a bad one. Riot Games refuses to condemn these acts in their story, and by extension, because of the umbilical cord between all fiction and all art to reality, they are not condemning this treatment in the real world. In effect, their allegorical parts of their story backfire due to disgusting incompetence, and their stories turn the oppression of real minorities into a funny gimmick. It's stupid, to be blunt. They downplay this oppression's significance by not taking a stance, and it is insulting to have to deal with as a member of a protected class. But it should be insulting to anyone that this is the state that the lore is in, where we have accidental justification of concentration camps. I've had the right to get married for less years than I have been alive. Please let that sink in. Protected classes are still fighting for equality, and once we have equality, we then are going to have to fight for equity. So, since people like me were literally put in the camps during the Second World War and exterminated, It's appalling to see echoes of the Holocaust in the media I consume, and even more appalling to see stand-ins for the people that exterminated millions of people across Europe ever to be presented as heroes. And the stand-ins for people like me villainized for fighting against the oppression that we endure. On the topic of Jarvan IV, the king of this nation, he's not technically, personally putting people in the camps. But the text outright says that his stance toward mages is quote-unquote hard, meaning that he's bigoted against them for things that they can't control because he's an ignorant sack of shit. Furthermore, even if he does not support the putting of the mages in the camps, he does nothing about it, which makes him culpable since he is an absolute monarch. What's more is that Riot Games media seems to villainize and demonize Silas, a champion in the game, whose only crime is wanting to be free, and who leads a mage rebellion against the people who literally oppress him and tried to execute him, who treated him as an object, as a metal detector for mages. Like, the story unironically tries to act like Silas is a bad guy for rebelling against those who oppress them. It repeatedly casts demacia in the good light. The biggest example I can think of seems to be the Warriors music video, where all of the Demacians are like depicted as the good guy for some reason, and it's just gross. Like, if the story was told from my point of view, Silas would be the revolutionary hero that he is, but for some reason Silas is continually like depicted as a bad guy for standing up for his own rights and standing up for what's right in general. Constantly, right-wing politicians call for the extermination of queer people. Religious leaders call for our extermination. And rather than using their art to make a statement against those ideas, Riot Games tries to play enlightened centrist. They sit back and they pretend like there's an ounce of merit to these ideas that these policies and these people put forward. They present a world wherein a character like Vayne, who literally hunts down and serial kills anyone who is not like her, anyone who is remotely magical of any kind, literally just a racist serial killer, and then they're like, yeah, Vayne is a hero. The serial killer character, by the way, is a hero. In the biggest lore event that happened for the game, they made the serial killer character a hero. Twice. They made two serial killer characters the hero in that event. During the Sentinels of Light event, Vayne, who is meant to be a hero on the stupid Avengers Endgame superhero team, is shown to be a bigot. She tries to kill Shyvana when she meets her, entirely on the basis of Shyvana being different looking, basically, and labels Shyvana as a monster because of characteristics that Shyvana can't change and are irrelevant to whether or not she's actually a monster. Vayne is a racist monster and is depicted as a hero in this game. And Shyvana, who is a victim of fantasy racism, is depicted as evil when she turns into a dragon and tries to murder the shit out of Vayne because Vayne is being racist. It's disgusting. And it's like Riot Games simultaneously wants their popular character Vayne to be a hero, but they accidentally in quotes, wrote her to be racist. And so their solution is to have her be racist and be a hero so she can fulfill the plot role of hero, but they don't want to drop the racism. And so it could make sense for Vayne to be a hero if she went through character development to not become racist. But she does not, because no one in League of Legends' lore has gone through character development in 10 years, because Riot Games doesn't write any stories. They don't actually do anything with their lore. It's so frustrating. And she's racist through the entirety of Sentinels of Light, but only to arbitrary people she randomly chooses to be racist to, so that her racism doesn't actually slow down the plot. Because her being racist should make her into deadweight and should force her into character development, but it doesn't in the story. Because, you know, Vayne, the ridiculous character that she is perfectly fine being racist to Shyvana because Shyvana is purple and looks like a dragon, and is also perfectly fine being friends with a cat person, and perfectly fine being friends with a zombie serial killer. Because for some reason, we put the zombie serial killer on the Avengers Endgame superhero team. I don't get it. I don't understand. It's so ridiculous. And this brings me to my next point of contention I have with, you know, Sentinels of Light. The ruined Shyvana skin. Shyvana is turned white in her ruined skin. This is stupid. Turning Shyvana white stands in the face of the theme of Shyvana's story, which is that being different is a strength and not a weakness. No other characters in this skin line got whitewashed except for Shyvana. Karma, another character with dark skin, keeps her skin color in her ruined skin. And furthermore, Shyvana's skin being turned white makes less sense when you delve into why her skin is even changing color. Where the other characters become desaturated, not only is Shyvana desaturated, but her entire hue is also changed. It just seems like she is having her skin color changed so that she looks like the rest of the Demacian characters, which is stupid because, like, half the game that are human characters are, like, white people. But Shyvana is supposed to be at her most draconic and unhinged point, yet she looks less like herself than ever before. And it is a bizarre choice that entirely just seems to come from laziness. Shyvana's purple skin color, right? It is artistic shorthand, as TBS Cayenne would maybe say. I don't know. I feel like I've heard TBS Cayenne say artistic shorthand before. But when you make a character who is othered by her society purple, and the rest of her society has normal human skin tones, then that is artistic shorthand for this character is different. It's just like if you were making a Texan character and you needed a really easy way to say this character is different from the other characters in the roster because they are from Texas. What would you do? Well, you would put a cowboy hat on them if they were from Texas, because that's a Texas thing. It's an easy way to point out to a viewer, like, an important part of their character. And the most important part of Shyvana's character is that she is a dragon person and that she's different. So, boom, purple and covered in scales. But Shyvana loses her draconic features entirely. It doesn't make sense. And it becomes a big problem when you write an allegorical character if you mess with them in this fundamental way. Shyvana's otherness, her draconic features, are the features that the entire oppression, racism, bigotry, moral, and, like, story piece is built on. So when you remove something that is explicitly meant to stand in for being gay, for being trans, ethnic features that, you know, find you mistreated by those around you, things like that, and you do so in an effort to make your allegorical character maybe more appealing, you run into the issue of sending a message that those features are a problem and they're shameful. Because when queer-coded characters in media are constantly portrayed as evil in things like demacia, LOL, but like Disney movies, when they're portrayed as effeminate men who prey on the innocent, or butch women who prey on the innocent, or cross-dressers who harass the innocent, or vampires and werewolves that kill the innocent, a queer-coded character having the allegorical feature of queerness deleted to make her more palatable, or to make her not stand out as much, or to make her more similar to the characters around her that are more popular, it sends a problematic message to your audience. When you whitewash Shyvana, you say to your audience that the traits that see them a victim of bigotry in the real world Yes, they actually are worthy of shame, actually. Because just like them, Shyvana's features aren't palatable. And that is a really sad thing to say to someone. Shyvana, like queer people and other marginalized groups, despite the themes that Riot Games is putting in their stories, is not good enough for our society if she's different from the people around her. She has to be white for some reason. She has to lose her dragon scales. And she must conform. And Riot Games says you should too. You should conform and be like everyone else around you. And if you aren't, that's a problem. Shyvana, and you, though, despite what Riot Games says, are made stronger by what makes you different. Otherness is good. That is a fact. And it's the theme of Shyvana's story that I believe is intentional. And the trajectory shown by the ruined Shyvana skin shows that Riot Games seems to be moving toward homogeny, away from otherness, and away from diversity. And I think that that's bad. The greatest thing about people is the diversity of the human race. And if you have a homogenous roster in the way that League's overall trajectory seems to be working towards, that diversity just isn't going to be present. And I think that that is pretty sad. Haha! So, comparative analysis time. An example of a non-Shyvana champion who falls victim to the objectification of Riot Games is, of course, the often criticized design of Kai'Sa. Kai'Sa's visuals don't match her thematic or her gameplay at all, and this only serves to deter potential customers who would otherwise find the concept of the character very compelling. Kai'Sa is supposed to be a tooth-and-nail survivor living in a perpetually hostile environment and on the run and at war with evil aliens. Despite that, she wears no real armor, and she is in a skin-tight booba catsuit that perfectly comes down in between her boobs and opens up so that you can see them. She wears no helmet, despite the fact that the only other human characters we see go into the void either wear significant personal protective equipment because it is toxic to humans, such as Kassadin, or get torn apart by the void's energy, like Malzahar. And despite the fact that Kassadin wears his personal protective equipment, he's still purple and gross looking, even though he wore protective equipment, right? And so, in terms of business, deterring players by creating poor, visuals, gameplay design, connections, or just even just not making realistic characters, serves the purpose of messing yourself up. And Kai'Sa's, and just like Shyvana's, visuals utterly fail to deliver on the full promise of the character, right? And although the prioritization of the lecherous gaze is profitable, it alienates feminine people and people who care about feminine representation because they feel that they're not well represented or well respected by the people who make the game. As such, minimizing the number of demographics you disparage is probably a good thing that Riot Games should work towards. And among the social implications of including a more diverse array of character designs in your game, such as challenging prevalent ideas about feminine beauty and worth in our society, or creating a vast array of characters, it's just nothing but profitable for long-term engagement. Because the more demographics that engage with the game, the more demographics have a chance to hand over their money and, all of that fun stuff. Like Shyvana, Kai'Sa's sexualization adds nothing to her character whatsoever. And the same can be said for most characters in the game, with the exception of the succubi. which I don't think are necessary in the first place. It endeavors to say nothing about Kaisa or about Shyvana, who were both drawn by the same person, by the way, that those who had her designed and beautifully drawn wanted to cater to their horniest members of their audience, or to themselves, and ignore any audience members who, actually value good women's representation. It just sucks. And with many, if not most, of the women in League of Legends, the potential power fantasy that could be provided to a consumer is often substituted with the same power fantasy time and time again: hot, sexy lady. This is evident among many champions, but even just comparing Kaisa and Shyvana, and then looking at Garen, who is like sort of Shyvana's mirror in terms of what she does, right? Because Garen and Shyvana are both, warriors on the front lines. You can see that Shyvana and Garen are both Demacian, and yet Shyvana looks, completely different than Garen because she's half clothed because she's a woman. And then Kaisa is also sexualized, and she's not a Demacian. And for many people, a sexy woman just isn't an engaging power fantasy on its own. A character being made an over-sexualized piece of eye candy can actively turn players away from the game. And this is because there's just such a high saturation of generically sexy characters in media currently that they've become the norm. For some women, it's also because they don't want to be reminded of the real-world objectification and pressure that they suffer while they're trying to cool off and have fun playing a video game. Therefore, in order to draw players in and keep them engaged, feminine character design needs to be diversified, and Shyvana's character design, as such, should not become any more sexualized than it currently is when it gets to her inevitable rework. And if anything, she should become far less sexualized. It would be an injustice to take one of the few unconventional-looking women in the game and objectify her further than she already has been. So, when Shyvana gets reworked, she just needs to have the sexualization turned down. I don't want her to look like Kaisa. Please, please, please do not make her like Kaisa. And with that, we're going to move on to the skins. Hello, and welcome to the skin section, to the fun section, to the happy section of the essay. Here I'll be analyzing all of Shyvana's skins and talking about what I think of them. And then I'm going to talk about the grand finale, which is what the solution is, and also how to fix her kit, in my opinion, and the opinion of the grandmasters that I talked to when I made this paper. So, with no further ado, we will get to classic Shyvana. You see, because Shyvana is so old and from an entirely different era of game design, her splash art and in-game model are stinky. This is something that should obviously be improved on to achieve maximum epicness for this character and to allow more artistic expression and fun to be had while playing. You see, dragon characters are compelling icons found in many cultures throughout many regions, and having a dragon character to play that actually feels and looks cool would no doubt draw in more customers, and please the people who already play the game and love dragons like me. Currently, both dragon champions in the video game, Shyvana, a European-style dragon, and Aurelian Soul, who is an Eastern-style dragon, they both fall short of being satisfying, and this leaves dragon lovers without the option to play as a dragon if they want a character that feels good, because both dragons feel like garbage. Regardless of their power, though, neither Shyvana nor Aurelian Soul are popular, with their pick rates on patch 12.7 being 3.4% and 0.76% respectively. Neither of these champions are hitting the mark with players, or else their pick rates would be higher. This, of course, is related to their gameplay being super boring, Shyvana's being like that from the start, and Aurelian's being like that from getting gutted like a fish 62 trillion times. Thank you, Riot Games. I didn't want to have fun while playing a mage character, actually. But in Shyvana's case, I believe it to be strongly influenced by her visual design as well as her horrible, horrible gameplay. So, although Shyvana's default splash art design is by no means perfect, it is the one closest to actually being a monstrous person, in my opinion, and so I like it a lot. It's really cute. I love it. Shyvana's draconic characteristics are on full display in the piece, and although it's quite a bit over-sexualized and has impractical armor, because of course it does, because we are sexist, It also represents atypical femininity in a strong and pretty positive light, which is good and surprising and new for Riot Games. Well, actually, technically, old for Riot Games because this is one of their oldest champions, and then they quickly stopped making good women for quite some time. But this is basically just a fluke. I think that Shyvana was accidentally good in a few ways for them. Oh yeah. That's true. Actually, yeah, that's true. Shyvana's body obviously could be more muscular since she's a beast warrior who fights with massive metal gauntlets, but overall, she fits the role of a monstrous woman well enough in her default skin. Her design also isn't so over-sexualized that it drives away players who have a vested interest in playing characters that are treated respectfully, so it is pretty successful in my opinion. I pretty much always use default Shyvana when I'm playing for these reasons. Shyvana's in-game look, though, is nothing but outdated and stinky. In both human and dragon form, she's incredibly lackluster, from her animations to her model to, like, literally everything about her, her abilities. This outdated grime... Oh yeah, her texturing. This outdated grime is especially evident when you compare Shyvana to Set, who is another boxing-style champion who was released in 2020, where Set receives realistic punching animations and a well-put-together model. Shyvana looks like she's pulled straight from 2012, or even earlier, which is, when she's actually from, so, fair. She features choppy, ugly, disgusting animations and texturing, and while she technically might have been on par with those of her time, she hasn't aged well at all, and I believe that her animations should be heavily modernized with smooth and fluid punching animations like Set's. The more realism from her punching, the better, in my opinion, obviously. She should look really, like, fluid. And also, side note time, Shyvana's dragon form isn't even a dragon by modern fantasy standards, or even by League of Legends standards, which has been ticking me off for so long. While some might argue that this is splitting hairs, I say that this is an important aspect of lore to keep in mind when you're designing a character or your setting. Shyvana's design is actually that of a wyvern and not a dragon, as shown in the above handy-dandy chart, and Shyvana's in-game model below clearly shows that she is a wyvern based on limb arrangement. Furthermore, she looks thin, unhealthy, and disgusting and emaciated. This look entirely fails to capture the power fantasy of a dangerous and ferocious dragon in-game, and there are map objectives in the game that actually have the limb arrangement of a dragon, but they are labeled as a drake, which is, strange, and they're just more scary looking than Shyvana, which is really demoralizing when you're playing the video game. The Infernal Drake, a mob that you kill for a team white buff and gold, is more menacing and powerful and difficult to kill usually than the actual character in the video game that you are playing when you pick a dragon character. And who on earth would want to play a character that's goofy and weaker looking than a mindless mob that you fight for gold? And more importantly, who wants to invest money into skins for a character that looks grimy and emaciated? Since this is a fantasy game, and because it would please nerds who care about the limb arrangements of dragons, and wouldn't affect those who do not care at all, Shyvana's dragon form should be upgraded either to have 4 legs and 2 wings to make her nickname accurate as or you should make her nickname more accurate and just call her like a half wyvern or something. Shyvana would be more intimidating if her wings weren't emaciated little baby wings, and she should, use them to fly for more things than just her ultimate. Because she must use her wings to attack people, though, her base skin and as such all of her other skins end up looking really ugly because you've got this like really choppy like swiping swoop animation that happens when you attack, and it's just really bad. And that animation could be improved for the base skin and then therefore all of her other skins if she actually got to like be a real dragon. Because she punches people and has that really gross animation, though, a lot of the power fantasy of a terrifying dragon is lost, and that sucks. So, Uh, Shyvana just needs an upgrade in general. She just needs to be modernized. I don't think that her default look has a ton wrong with it other than her, cringe outfit. But as for her abilities, I'm going to speak about those in the ability section quite soon. Our next skin is Iron Scale Shyvana, who has the coolest armor, in my opinion, out of any of the Shyvana skins. I like it a lot, except for the boob armor. I'm not super partial to the boob armor because she's not wearing a helmet and she looks feminine, and so the boob armor isn't super necessary to me for, like, artistic shorthand. But Iron Scale Shyvana suffers the same pitfalls in general because of the boob armor and because she isn't wearing a helmet. And the armor comes down and reveals vital regions of her. Has the same pitfalls of tons of League of Legends women and multiple Shyvana skins, which is that it's a little bit too sexualized for it to be practical, in my opinion, and it sucks because even within a fantasy setting, you don't want to be having parts of your body just unarmored for no reason. Her neck and the top of her chest are left entirely unprotected so that we can see her tasty, collarbones, I guess. The design is pretty boring, but overall I think it's one of her best skins. And like in all her skins, of course, she's whitewashed in this one, and for some reason she loses her horns and her helmet as well. But that affects her visual clarity, and, Riot Games doesn't care about visual clarity, lol. Iron Scale Shyvana is an upgrade from classic Shyvana in the area of the armor, because I like it a lot, even though it has some flaws. And in her in-game model, she's really, really high resolution and high poly. I don't know when this model was redone or something, but this is her most high quality model in the whole game that I've found, and it's very strange looking. I think this is her best skin in terms of net, her, other than her default classic skin, in terms of net good and bad things. Because it's whitewashed, it can't be her best skin overall, including classic, but best non-classic skin. This is the best one because it's just cool. I like it. It's really simple and it's really boring, and so it could have. If it were red and gold, I think it would be cooler. This is actually the kind of armor that I think that Shyvana should wear in the rework. So this, I like Iron Scale a lot. I just wish she weren't whitewashed. Yeah, I think Iron Scale is pretty nice. Bone Claw, though. Bone Claw Shyvana is not only a bad Shyvana skin, but a horrible abomination. The only redeeming part is the general idea of using dragon bones. But in this skin, Shyvana loses her skin color. She loses her horns. She's got her hair styled into the shape of horns, which is stupid looking. And it's just a naked woman skin, and I hate it so much. Her in-game model for this skin puts on display how abominable it is. I've got screenshots here. The skin is just a glorified bikini skin, and it's a distillation, honestly, of everything that's wrong with Riot Games. She is dressed up in tribal wear and put in a bikini for no reason other than to be sexy. This skin is gross. The skin is just over-sexualized. It looks to me like it's racist, because it looks like she, is kind of meant to look like a Native American, with all of the furs and the face paint and the bones and stuff. And it reminds me of stereotypical cartoons of Native Americans, which is kind of gross. And it seems to be drawing heavy inspiration from the way that people have depicted indigenous communities of the Americas, and I think that that's kind of gross, especially when indigenous women are often treated as though they're inferior or sexually available or easy victims. Making a skin that is supposed to be tribal looking, and the way you make it tribal looking is by sort of trying to mimic maybe what Native Americans would wear is, I don't know, it feels kind of gross to me to make someone look primitive by making them look like a specific culture. And when you do that, it's just shitty. I know this was supposed to be the fun part of the paper, but bone cloth sucks. So this is just the carelessness of Riot Games again when it comes to maximizing profit, and it's horrible. I think that this skin is on par with how horrible the Playboy Bunny Riven skin is, and I think it should be deleted. I think it should be replaced with an entirely new skin. Yeah. So next is a Dark Flame. Dark Flame is pretty epic, pretty okay, pretty gross in League of Legends, but this is the first Wild Rift one. Woo! Wild Rift! Wild Rift is so good. You see, shut up, dog. My dogs keep barking while I'm trying to record, and I've decided, frick it. Dark Flame Shyvana is actually a pretty good skin. When Riot Games updates this skin, they should just take the Wild Rift Dark Flame Shyvana, which entirely encapsulates a dark dragon that's distinctly feminine without being over-sexualized, and port it to League of Legends. Wild Rift's Dark Flame Shyvana is easily her best skin across every platform, and it's really beautiful and super cool. The armor is gorgeous, practical, looks cool, is still feminine, is still pretty. The detail is great, the color scheme is awesome. I love this. This is the greatest skin. Whoever designed this skin, you are a beast. This is what all Shyvana skins should look like, in my opinion. The League of Legends one is horrible. It has a disgusting boob window, so she can get stabbed to death through her armor. It sucks. You can tell a man designed that skin and was just really horny when he was designing it. If default Shyvana wore armor that looked like this in red and orange, I'd be nothing but ecstatic. This skin is truly great. I love it so much. I was being a silly goofy earlier when I said that Iron Scale was her best skin. I had forgotten entirely about this one. This one is so good. The next one is Ice Drake Shyvana, which also exists on Wild Rift, but unfortunately on Wild Rift kind of sucks compared to Dark Flame. Dark Flame's just the best. Ice Drake Shyvana falls victim to many of the same pitfalls as many other skins in League of Legends, especially Shyvana's. Of course it does, because she's whitewashed. Awesome. The Wild Rift version is significantly better, and I hope that a similar design to that one is used in the rework, but it just frustrates me that in a skin where Shyvana is supposed to be in a snowy environment, she's once again wearing underwear, like in the disgusting Boneclaw Shyvana skin. The argument could be made, of course, that, since she's an ice dragon, she's resistant to the snow, so that's why she's naked. Shut up. It's just a stupid idea. She retains none of her normally draconic features. She's just a naked white lady. And it sucks. And the skin could be so much cooler and tell a far more interesting story if the skin prioritized being an awesome fantasy skin instead of trying to be sexy. In the Wild Rift skin, Shyvana is properly clothed, which, allows her to still have a draconic feel, which is nice, but she's still been whitewashed and turned super pale, and she's not a purple lady like she's supposed to be. And she's had her scales removed. It's just unfortunate. The Wild Rift version seems to be made with the idea of making a dragon lady instead of making a sexy lady, which is nice, but she's still turned white, so it still gets a C. Championship Shyvana, the armor is pretty cool except for the weird thigh gap. I like the attention to detail a lot, that her shoulders don't have a lot of restrictive clothing on them, so that she can actually move her shoulders a bunch. That's actually really cool. Unfortunately, she's whitewashed, so that just sucks. This is just the trend with a ton of the skins. I would have just left this one out entirely if it weren't the only one that I had so little to talk about. This sucks, though. It's an awesome skin in general, but it just sucks that it hits the pitfall of random open thigh armor and she's turned white. This is exactly what kind of thing I imagine being done with her in the rework. The armor and the colors are really cool. I just don't think that she should be missing random armor so that we can look at her thighs. That docks points for this skin, and also the fact that she's again turned white for no reason docks points. You see, on the other hand, Super Galaxy Shyvana is one of the only Shyvana skins where she's actually put into a new situation at all. Because every Shyvana skin is just Shyvana, but she is in a different color armor, whereas Super Galaxy Shyvana is like a super awesome 1980s like anime character. She's turned white, of course, because why wouldn't she be? But aside from the pointy boob armor, it's really, really cool. Her long boots and her jumpsuit convey a super fun mecha warrior vibe, much like how the show Robotech had, like, really cool flight suits. Her helmet is awesome, and this skin, the really long hair, works a lot because it adds really fun anime flair that the skin seems to be going for. I especially like that in this skin, her suit and accessories are designed after her dragon mech and not the other way around, which is really cool. 02 from Darling in the Franxx, for example, has a suit that matches her mech and a mech that matches her. That's a lot what this reminds me of. This skin is really cool, and it doesn't seem to suffer the problems of like women's representation in League of Legends that other skins seem to suffer from, because although she's in a skin tight suit, it like makes sense to me that she's in a skin tight suit. Like, it's actually properly justified. Like, people who go up in pilots, they wear like tight clothing, they wear a jumpsuit, stuff like that, and it makes sense. So I really love this Shyvana skin. It's so good. The kit that I designed with the Relrax is sort of a Shen-like envisionment of Shyvana. She has like buffs for herself and her team that she applies, and like area control, and she's like a team reliant, not like a team specifically reliant, but she's a character that interacts with her team more than other characters. I kind of had it in my brain that it was like not like a tank enchanter, well, sort of like a tank enchanter. She has like buffs, right? It's pretty cool. And like, okay. I'm very excited. So the passive is Fury of the Dragonborn. I kept the name because that's a very cool name, and she's quite angry. The innate is the same as currently on live. It's Shyvana deals 20% bonus physical and magic damage to dragons. Additionally, she generates Fury based on her level over 2 seconds upon dealing or receiving damage, and basic attacks instantly generate Fury as well. Her Fury decays if she hasn't dealt or taken damage in the past like 10 seconds, and it's converted into HP like Rek'Sai on a scale. It scales with her level, so she heals more the more Fury or the higher level she is based on the amount of Fury she's consuming. She gains bonus movement speed based on how much Fury she's holding, up to a maximum of 30%. This is so that she doesn't lose out on the fact that she is a melee character and doesn't have, a reliable way to just, teleport onto people. A gap closer other than her ultimate seemed pretty lame, and so she gets some movement speed to try and chase people down so that she still has counterplay from characters that are ranged and like Ashe and stuff, so you can run away from her. Her Q is pretty similar, almost actually literally identical to the one on live, but I renamed it because it's, bink bonk. It's called Pyretic Strikes. I've got the information here. It's literally just the same as the one on live for this, because this ability is just pretty good. It's pretty nice, pretty satisfying to use. Except it's different in one way, that the second attack deals a cleave in a cone, like Titanic Hydra, when you use her Q, so that she's got like wave clear, so you can play her top lane, and it helps with her jungle clear because her W is different this time, and it's not just the AoE burn, so you would be using this ability to fight multi-target camps and stuff, is at least the idea. Her W is called Draconic Sundering. This is like the meat of her kit, the meat of her power budget. Basically, she lights the flame, or she lights herself on fire and gains a shield, and she explodes the ground around her after a certain amount of time when the shield is gone, and it creates this fire zone on the ground, right? And the fire zone, it buffs her and her champion allies' basic attacks against marked enemies. They, when they auto-attack them, they detonate the mark. This is where her E mark now is, the 12%. And it also deals, bonus damage against monsters and stuff, right? But when you blow up the mark, now that it's like a one-time use mark, when an ally or you hit the mark with their auto attack, it hits them with a really massive slow for 0.1 seconds, so that you can try and catch up to them, and it breaks their armor and magic resist based on level. The passive of this ability, because this is like the big buff, fighting with your team ability, is that when Shyvana and her allies are on Scorched Earth, they gain bonus on-hit magic damage and attack speed, which are doubled for Shyvana and just, a normal amount for her teammates. And it grounds enemies on the Scorched Earth so that it's more difficult to run away from, the angry dragon beating you up, but you can still get out of the zone and escape. Additionally, in the zone, Shyvana and her allies are granted an effect based on the elemental rift present in the game. Infernal is bonus damage, Ocean is healing in the zone, Wind is increased movement speed, Mountain is reduced incoming damage, and Hextech is more attack speed. So this is kind of like the center part of how you use her to function with the rest of your team. Your W ability, you blow up the ground and you fight with your team and you fight around your zones and you control an area, kind of like a Shen W, but instead of you wanting to put enemies in your Shen W to prevent their damage, you want to put your allies in your W, probably your melee allies is the most effective, so that you and your front line can effectively fight the enemy on a ground zone, similar to Cassiopeia W. This is where most of her power budget went, because the burning the ground idea is just very cool, and it kind of changes up her playstyle a bit so that she can, fight with sort of 8 billion dash characters and actually properly frontline, since taunts are really stinky poo-poo, but grounds at least let you create an area of control. Her E ability is changed to Scale Whip because she has a tail in my brain in her rework, so she whips her tail out for this ability, and it deals damage, and it slows the enemy that she hits. If it hits a marked enemy, though, it'll stun them. So this ability, with this ability, assuming you have your 3 abilities, the sort of idea is that you've got movement speed from your passive, and it's pretty... it's somewhat difficult for you to 100% solo set up a gank, right? So, you can't make plays entirely alone, so she's more of a farming, team fighty jungler than just a run-in at them jungler like Elise. But you can potentially run into a lane with the movement speed charged up from your Fury, and then you can scale whip them to slow them and try to run into melee range with them and like blow up the earth on top of them and ground them so that they can't run away if they're not able to get away by the time you close the gap after the slow. The slow is like 25%. It's pretty low. And then you can deal damage and you can buff your ally during a gank, right? But I kind of was thinking of this as being more of like a skirmishing, fighting in the river type jungler, because these abilities are more, they're more oriented around like a sustained fight. And a gank isn't really a sustained fight, so it's more for skirmishing, more for fighting around objectives and stuff like that, than running in and changing a lane fundamentally with like crowd control and stuff. Kind of like how Lilia can gank a lane and deal damage, but she has a hard time setting up a gank entirely on her own, other than with her slow, or you know, other champions that aren't ganking junglers, right? And then, her ultimate is, it's Dragon's Descent still, because she can still transform into a dragon. The dragon form it functions the same way. She transforms, she gets bigger, she deals damage in the dash, but when she dashes and stuff, she becomes a cooler, bigger, more epicer dragon than she currently becomes. And she gets new abilities that aren't entirely just upgraded one-to-one versions of her old abilities from her human form, because that's lame. And Gnar doesn't just keep the same exact abilities when he transforms. So her Q ability is Jaws That Bite, because I love the Jabberwocky. And it works in a similar way, except for instead of attacking 2 times, she attacks 3 times, and she shoots a very big, not like a very big, but like a pretty decently sized cone of flame behind the target, right? So she bites them 3 times while breathing fire and shoots fire behind them. So it's kind of like fire breath, kind of like, just nom 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 nom. She's hungry for the enemy, right? It's pretty scary, in my brain at least. For Claws That Catch, which is her W, she actually has a very short, dash. It's not meant to be a dash, it's meant to be, like a sort of... It's only a dash for flavor, basically. So she leaps a short distance, so she leaps up into the air and smashes down onto the earth, and she lands and she explodes the earth, creating the same scorched earth effect from her other W, and she deals damage to nearby enemies, fearing them for 0.5 seconds and marking them for 5 seconds, right? So this ability makes the same buff the same buff zone as her other W, and so she gains the same effect. So she can jump up into the air and smash down onto someone basically in melee range of her and create this fire zone as she jumps up and breathes fire and smashes down into the ground. And then her enemies are, it's harder for them to get away from her because she is, creating the ground zone. They are their feet are stuck in the mud because she's melting the ground under them, right? Is kind of the idea. And then her allies can go into her zone and beat the crap out of the enemies, the other frontliners on her team. And then, finally, her E ability is called Torrent of Flame. It's got a range shorter than Talia range for Talia Q. It's actually just the Aurelion Soul ASU Q channel ability. I didn't think that they were going to put that in the game, but I saw it and I was like, oh crap, that's literally what I put in the rework. But I made mine months ago, so I don't know. But basically, she channels and she unleashes like flame in front of her, kind of like a Vel'Koz ult, kind of like the Aurelion Soul thing, and her flames marks enemies so that her allies can like suck the mark off of them and deal damage, kind of like Leona passive, now that I'm thinking about it. But more importantly, she can use her E ability to breathe fire in an area and put her Scorched Earth on the ground to create a ground zone and buff her allies under it. And yeah, that is the kit. In my brain and in Relrox's brain, it seemed pretty good. I've gotten some good feedback about it. This is definitely not the first version, but I think this would be a way cooler way to depict a dragon in the game. So please tell me what you think. I think that this would be really cool, and it would be a really fun way to play like a Juggernaut character. Because I hate the way that AP Shyvana plays, and this would be a really cool way to put like a fighter, a warden-y character in the game. So yeah, please tell me what you think. This is just hopefully any of these ideas could be carried over. I love the idea of like burning the ground, right, and buffing your enemies, because I feel like there aren't enough characters in League of Legends that buff like multiple allies at a time and stuff. Like there's Lulu, but and Taric, but like I feel like there's a sore lacking of like, I'm going to buff my buddies, right? And it would be cool to be a frontliner that buffs your buddies, like a tank in an MMO. And Shen already has the taunt stuff, so this would be more of like a buffing ability. So yeah.